Welcome back to my discussion about print media design and what makes good design. I wanted to show you some newspapers for today, just to show you how design works as a medium of communication, how design helps a person navigate through a newspaper or a magazine or any print media. So as you can see, we've got the Namibian here, we've got the Republican, also we have the new era. So for example, we can see some different things as to how designers are telling you what's important. The most obvious thing is, of course, identifying the lead story with a big headline. Man with COVID-19 ends up being arrested, basically, being in handcuffs. You'll see how the big headline is used to distinguish the lead story from other stories, such as the murder over the donkey, also quite shocking. Also, you'll see you have what's sometimes called a caption story here, where you just have the picture, the demonstration against racism, together with just a caption that explains the basic story, and also using a different colored type, in this case red type, just to point the reader to, who wants to go that far, to a story on page 2. You'll also see you have, which quite a lot of newspapers have these days, you have these little what they sometimes call teasers, these little blocks that tell you about what is coming up on the inside pages. So it serves as almost like advertising for what's on the inside pages. Also, you'll notice, this is quite well laid out. I think it's actually quite a lot of text, but it's also doesn't appear to be overwhelming. It's sort of broken up in various ways. You also have something like a pull quote, a quote from Assistant Commissioner Becker saying, "Dit is 'n gemors, it's a mess." You have the scene where the COVID-19 positive fugitive stayed. So you have a lot of information put in quite a small space. You have all the key information there. You have at the top something saying that there are now 34 cases, just a little snippet of information. Here also you have the lead of the story, you'll notice, in a different font. Also the use of shading to distinguish the byline, the names of the authors of the story from the rest of the text. So generally I'd say it's a very good example of how design is giving you little morsels of information and encouraging you to read on further if you want to. The Namibian is a bit of a different case. It's almost like that there are two lead stories on the page, and sometimes newspapers will do that, where one story is seen as slightly more important. It might not be good practice to do it on the regular. So you'll see the quite bold headline, "Government Staffs Anti-Corruption Commission," indicates that that's the most important story. But also the use of that red background for the fugitive positive for COVID-19 really sets that story off. You also have a subsidiary headline there. Some people might call it a tagline, as Namibia confirms community transmission. So that's also an important thing that layout people and design people will do. So you have a main headline there. It's the use of different fonts and different colors clearly, states that's the main thing if you're just going through it quickly. you have a little bit more, slightly less important information as Namibia confirms community transmission. I also wanted to go to show you a couple of other things how design works as communication. This, of course, is the SMS page, and this could potentially be quite a lot of text. It could be a bit overwhelming to the reader. If you've got like just 2 minutes, you're really not gonna you might look at all this text and feel overwhelmed. So having things like the red squares, the kind of bullet points, this serves to break up the text. Also using alternate bold and non-bold text to try and clearly distinguish one SMS from the others is very good practice. Here you also have the economics page. So you'll see economics pages are often designed in a more formal way, less fancy stuff, a bit heavier on the text. It's assumed perhaps that if it's something as important as your bottom line, you'll want to read a bit. But also notice that you've got a kind of secondary masthead. So you have, which signifies the bottom line. So you have your main masthead here, the newspaper's logo on the front page, and then you have a kind of subsidiary masthead signifying the bottom line, signifying that this is for you if you want to read about business and economics. Also notice how you've got a fact box here, which is quite clever. You've got the financial indicators, and this can easily be overwhelming information. You can be like, oh my God, what's all this text? It used to be really, really dense. But these days what most newspapers do is they break it up into various bite-sized pieces. So you have like exchange rates first, then bonds and share indices and other economic indicators such as inflation rates. One could argue various things about this. It's very colorfully designed, but there could also be problems. Nothing is really explained. So you have to know that CPI is Consumer Price Index. It's a measure of inflation, of how prices are increasing year on year. But you do have some things like move of the day, South African Rand drops, so there is a bit of explanation. And design is used to almost demystify some of this, to break it into manageable pieces, to make something complicated like financial indicators less overwhelming. For the new era, we go on. For the new era, it's in some ways a more traditional newspaper design. In recent years, you've got newspaper design looking more like Republicain. Easier to read fonts, less text, more pictures, more things like fact boxes and that sort of thing. Whereas traditionally, you had more of a look like New Era, a bit busier, a bit more text. One thing they have done here, which is quite interesting, is a deep etch. So a deep etch or a cutout with the police officer, making, a different way to break up the text and to put a different shape, not just sort of square shapes of pictures, but cut out the outline of the officer. So that allows you firstly to put in a bit more text than you otherwise would, but it also puts some different shapes in the design, some kind of variety. Notice that also they've used color. For example, the positive man who bribed his way back, and the word bribed as an important word has been given what they call a spot color. Here a red color. Once again you see the main picture and the caption story about the anti-racism demonstration. I wanted us to quickly, if we may, go to the youth corner. So this is once again using a secondary sort of masthead or logo within the paper to distinguish one section from the other. So you can clearly see one side is quite formal, it's also the business pages. Then you get the youth corner, that's sort of bright colors, funky text, something that hopefully would be more appealing to young people. Less boring, if you will. Now, some people would say that, this is really just being a bit manipulative, perhaps, pandering to the youth, maybe. Maybe the youth don't need this. But you could also argue that it's creating a kind of section that's specifically for young people. That young people who are bored with business and with heavy text and, that kind of thing. People who live on social media, people who want something different. So here you have cartoons, you have a lot more use of bright colors, you have different kinds of pictures, like the picture of Mavis Elias, which is, a very kind of stylized kind of studio shot, quite different from your regular news mug shot, if you will. So you do have these kind of differences. Same with Kundana, which is obviously the indigenous language section of New Era. You have a different look once again, a different logo to distinguish it from the rest of the paper. But once again, as opposed to the youth section, it's more formal, more similar to the English language front page. So these are just some of the ways. There are many others, but these are just some of the ways that design can be used to guide a reader through the paper, to communicate with the reader, basically to put another almost level of meaning into the newspaper reader's experience. I hope you enjoyed this, and please do drop your discussion in the comments. Thank you very much.